So, I want to talk about the evolution of social media from the 2010s to the 2020s and how Gary Vee ruined social media. So, what happened was in the 2010s, when you went online, you knew who you were looking at. Chances are you were following your friends. And this was the era where social media was promising that what it had to offer was this new and improved way to connect with your peer group. So if you went to college, you would sign up for Facebook and you would be able to build relationships and deeper connections with the people you already knew or knew of through the feed. Then what started to happen were creators were making content, and creators and influencers were people you didn't know but who were making media that was relevant or valuable to you. And at that time, there weren't many creators and influencers compared to what we have today. So it what the idea was that you would post consistently and people would find you as a personality and they would follow you and they would learn about your story and your context and your lore. One thing that's very important about building relationships is context. So, without context, we don't really have a way of understanding who we are. So, what ended up happening in the 2020s and what the big difference is there started to be more of an adoption to social media. So in the 2010s, it was still mostly for millennials and um that was pretty much it. It was mostly for millennials, right? Um, but what ended up happening is the younger generation, Gen Z, started adopting social media and the older generation started adopting it. And so by default, there just started to be more media production. At the same time, we were receiving messages about how impactful social media was for marketing and how if you wanted to make it in your business or just in life, you should get on social media. It went from being some kind of like niche hobby to more like a standard, an industry standard and expectation. So then you start seeing people create LinkedIn social media personalities and YouTube like just now you start to see this real industry of creators. Now, the way that the social media platforms decided to deal with this influx of media was um, they were privy to the fact that they could make a lot of money without focusing on the friends aspect anymore. They were like, people aren't really even using social media to keep up with their friends. They're using social media for entertainment and media. They're using it to keep up with their favorite celebrities or watch something entertaining. And during this time, Hollywood gets hit really bad. Music gets hit really bad. All of our big entertainment industries get hit really bad and everything starts to dissolve into um, social media use, right? And pixels and followers and blah, blah, blah. So now enter the 2020s. You go online and you don't know who you're looking at. Now the feed has been designed where I don't know what I'm looking at, but I do see funny memes or I see, you know, things that the algorithm thinks are relevant or things that I'm going to find entertaining without needing to know who the people are. And then on top of that, instead of falling for a specific creator or a specific influencer, there is no real expectation that I need to follow the people I'm getting entertained by. Right now, we're saying how much follower count doesn't matter anymore. Well, it doesn't matter anymore because they built a different infrastructure of the internet. So you can go viral and not have any way to communicate with the people you just went viral for. Fame is cheap, essentially. That's what they redesigned the internet to be. And the reason why I blame Gary Vee is because I find that his rhetoric and what he was really pushing in the 2010s and kind of he was the leader in telling us what social media was for. um, he really inspired this echo chamber and this network effect that forced social media to redistribute and rethink about how to distribute all the media. And basically, in 2020, these companies got really good at plugging up all these rabbit holes that creators and influencers used to use to pull their audiences out of social media and into their own domains, into their websites, into their music, into their films, into their podcasts, where now all that's plugged up. So instead of you leaving the platform, back in 2010s, social media was designed for you to leave the platform. Now everything's designed for you to stay on. And they're doing their best to try to get you to make money on their platform, but they really want to have a end closed system, closed end system where there's no reason to leave, and honestly there's no reason to even have context of who you are. So this is who you are, and this is who you are with context. Imagine your favorite artist, right? If you didn't have the context of your favorite artist and you didn't know some of the inspiration behind their songs, or how they grew up, or where they grew up, or why they believe what they believe, then it really takes away a lot of the closeness and intimacy that you feel with that artist, right? Maybe you just like that artist one song and you relate to them because you like that one 30-second clip that they have. But artists don't like being related to this way. The whole point of what attracts them to being artists is being able to share their contextual value and their story and what they have to say. But the way the internet is currently built says, no, 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 we don't want your story. And honestly, if you try to tell your story, you're not going to be heard because there's too much to flip through, that people don't even have the retention to listen to your story. Even if they wanted to, they might save your stuff and tell themselves that they're gonna, visit it later, but they don't actually do that because our brains are being exploited to flip through media over and over and over again. So you're in a trap, right? You've been trafficked, and I've been saying this for years, and I'm going to continue to explain the different ways that you've been trafficked and how we are continually being trafficked through different social media features that create different social behaviors that are creating a culture that is decaying. So cultures are like little petri dishes of activity, right? So, remember in elementary school or middle school, you had a petri dish and you could create an ecosystem in your petri dish, and you see, oh, this relates to this and this feeds off of that, and these two things interact. That's what a culture is. It's a cluster of activity and the way of how organisms relate to each other. Now, if you put things in the petri dish like social media or story replies or AI, everything, all the activity in the petri dish starts to move differently and do different things. But if the people inside are not aware of how much these things are changing their culture and their environment, they just kind of keep trying to do what used to work. And they're like, wait, why isn't this working anymore? Wait, why isn't this working anymore? Wait. And it's like, you'll get old advice and people will be like, oh, like you need to do this old advice. And you'll try to do the old advice, but the old advice doesn't work in the new world. And old is relative in our particular petri dish because something that is as old as 5 years old is really old. Where in traditional cultures, 5 years is not a long time at all. Typically human cultures stay pretty much the same technologically for decades, if not hundreds, if not thousands of years. The issue with our culture is we renew it and we transform it because we have a bias about technology, and we keep inserting foreign technology into our culture, and it keeps disrupting our ability to relate.